just a little bit more of an understanding about critical conversations. I just thought I'd sort of explain where it's come from for Helix Arts. So it functions in a little bit of a similar way to an art school crit. So the overview is that we're going to have presentations from speakers about their practice, about their projects they've worked on and their methodology, followed by a group discussion, in which I guess the kind of themes and issues you're welcome to share that you've kind of experienced or maybe completely dispute. So they act as an opportunity for all of us who work within participatory and community settings to have just that little bit of time to listen, to reflect, and we hope that this evening will inspire and invigorate as well as challenge us. A little bit about where this particular event has come from and why we're looking at this topic of embedding the arts within and how you can go about embedding the arts within wider services is that we've worked with Nicola Maxwell, who's a photographer and who'll be one of our speakers, on a project called Rowntree, which started with a pupil referral unit in Newcastle and graduated to working with the YMCA in Walker. It was kind of the key aim of that project was about embedding the arts within their service provision to their young people and looking at how we might be able to change in some way their service that they offer as like their arts service as a whole.
Hello everybody, my name's Steven Rowntree. I've worked in public health now for over 12 years now. Like Fran said, I think it's coming a timely this presentation coming up as a timely opportunity now to reflect on some of the work that has been done in arts and public health as well. For myself as well, currently I work for Prostate Cancer UK as a community services manager, and it's an opportunity for me to reflect on some of the work that I have done previously in the past with arts intervention and public health. It's a bit of a career pathway, I suppose, that we're going to look back and reflect on some of the work that we have developed and delivered in public health in the North East as well. So first of all, I had an interest in developing a project called Arts on Request, and the idea was that was working with people with mild and moderate depression and anxiety through the Healthy Living Centres in Sunderland area, and we'll explore a little bit about that, some of the difficulties that we experienced with the Arts on Request and establishing Arts on Request. Did some work further with Sunderland Teaching Primary Care Trust in public health team, health inequalities, specifically focusing on men's health inequalities in the Sunderland area, and some of the health issues based around that and how we embedded some of the arts interventions within that. And then Washington Mind's Young People's Project, where we established some young people's arts intervention project as well, and we'll explore a little bit more about that as well. So first of all, in 2001 it was now, I worked on the Arts on Request project. It was a project, Healthy Living Centre project, with 3 years worth of funding to develop an arts intervention project for people with mild and moderate depression and anxiety. The whole idea, the concept behind Arts on Request was to use art as a therapeutic tool for people with mild and moderate depression, and it was a pilot scheme to look at and evaluate whether arts intervention was as effective as medication. It was based in Sunderland. Some of the issues we were looking at was employment, who we needed on board with that. We had an ethics committee, we had a steering group, Sunderland University were on board, public health teams were on board. We had also CPN professionals on board and GPs on board with this as well. So we, as a result, the project contract 3 artists on a part-time basis, an hourly basis, to develop the arts intervention project, and it was through Sunderland Council as well. The CPN was seconded as well for safety of patients and evaluating patients' scores as well for improvement of mental health. There was 3 cohorts to the arts intervention and the Arts on Request. There was the arts intervention cohort that people with mental health really just got arts intervention. That was their only intervention that they got. We had a medication where people just got medication as their intervention for their mental health, and then we also had arts and medication, and we evaluated each scores with that as well. The evaluation was done by Sunderland University as well. Some of the issues we did have when establishing the project, obviously with ethics committees, the ethics committee took a long time to get through the ethics committee and establishing that as well. Some of the workers, employment of workers, secondment of staff as well, especially from the health service, Seconding staff took a long time to identify an appropriate CPN who was interested enough to work in arts intervention. This also had a huge impact on the funding timescale. The funding was for a 3-year project. That initially took nearly a year to establish and get the project up and running and have the right people in place to establish that. That impacted on how long the project would run for, so it impacted on the timescale. It was then developed a 2-year project of intervention. Also, certainly the funding was for high deprivation areas of Sunderland which had the highest incidence of depression and anxiety. It was the highest antidepressant. And the areas that we then were looking at was the Coalfield area of Sunderland and Washington area had the highest incident rates of mild to moderate depression and the highest medication for antidepressants as well. One of the biggest issues we had was getting GPs on board, getting GPs to get on board with it and refer clients. Initially the project was set up for GPs to refer and would only accept referrals from GPs to the project. Again, very difficult to get GPs on board as well. GPs are used to prescribing medication for mild to moderate depression and anxiety. To get them on board with arts intervention was very difficult, and some of the timescales did impact on our timescales. Again, we were able to go back to the funders and look at changing some of the funding ideas around that. And we were able to take self-referrals. We had a lot of people who identified that they would like to access the arts intervention, but GPs necessarily wouldn't refer. So we changed the funding criteria, and so people could self-refer. People could self-refer to the project, and we've seen an increase in self-referrals. Did a lot of publicity with the local press around raising awareness of arts and request. Evaluating of the project, arts and request project using the Beck's depression inventory. It proved that the accessing the arts intervention improved overall outcomes. That improved everybody on the project who accessed the arts intervention had an improved score on the Beck's inventory programme. And that really was looking at, and that against medication as well, was really successful in really improving people's mental health with that as well, just as effective as antidepressants as well. However, the project was only it worked out, it was only a 3-year project. Funding for the Healthy Living Centres was no longer available and was pulled. The project itself continued on, the group itself continued with the project and was self-sustainable within Sunderland for a short period of time, and did receive referrals, self-referrals for people who maybe had known people in the area and were promoting the work as well. However, the CPN wasn't on board with that anymore once the funding was pulled from that. The secondment of staff had moved from that as well. I then went on and worked in public health. I worked Sunderland Teaching Primary Care Trust in the public health team for 5.5 years, and delivering men's health inequalities in Sunderland. It's had some of the most deprived areas in the northeastern parts of Sunderland as well. So it was working with these communities around engaging men in health interventions and health promotion. A lot of the work we did was with long-term unemployment. A lot of these men we worked with, or I worked with, were ex-shipbuilders, ex-miners, and it was engaging them in sort of health promotion and looking at their health as well. We worked alongside the job centre and job linkage, and we're establishing men's health groups as well. They had established a men's health group, but were really concerned about some of the health issues that men were presenting with or coming with. So that's just to get on board with and how we could work with these men around some of the health issues that they were experiencing as well. A lot of the work we did was engaging with these men. It was very difficult to engage with these men around any sort of health issues. They would often see that health issues was not something that them should be concerned about. It was something that it was for women, and health promotion was all about women's services. It was nothing necessarily seen for them. They would always say that community services was not for me, wouldn't access community services. Pretty much similar with GPs. Many of them, there was a couple of them didn't even have GPs, but many of them would never see the GP for 6-7 years as well. So we looked at establishing how we could engage these men in some health promotion work and in tackling some of the health inequalities that these men were experiencing. It was a great way of addressing the elephant in the room. A lot of these men that we were working with, there was a big issue around anger, around their mental health and anger. Anger seemed to be a big issue with all of these men. For these men who'd been long-term unemployed, they were angry with the system, they were angry with the job centre, who were the ones on their back, constantly on their back, how them were perceived by the job centre, but also how them were perceived in society, how them seen themselves, but also how the society seen them. It was the elephant in the room. There was a lot of anger. There was a lot of anger around the change in the system, how many of these men, last time they went for employment or went for a job, they knew somebody who could get them a job. There was high employment rates then. They said they could move out from one job and get another job the next day, and they knew somebody who could get them that job. They didn't have to fill application forms in, they didn't have to fill online application forms in. It had completely changed. The environment had completely changed around that. Also, a lot of the arts intervention we looked at developing was looking at how we could explore some of the issues that these men were presenting with. One of the arts interventions we did with these men was looked at, and we got them to explore exactly what arts intervention them would want. And a lot of them said they'd never done arts in school, and some of these men were in the late 50s, early 60s. So we looked at addressing some of the arts intervention. Them identified that photography. Photography was something that them would really like to get involved in. But again, they were frightened. It had moved from the old film cameras to digital. Very frightened with that, and a lot of them had never used cameras since it moved, because they didn't have computers or were frightened of computers. So it was engaging them and getting them involved in that. We looked at doing a portrait exhibition. We worked with Tiny Wee Museums around doing a portrait exhibition with these men. And the idea was to get this story that these men had. These men had real powerful stories. So we looked at doing an exhibition, a portrait exhibition with these men. First of all, these men were just, I'm not having my picture taken, and I'll not be up on there, and I'll not be... Once we got them involved and got them behind the camera and working the camera, these men were really keen to get on board with it and really get at the front. They all had a turn. And what we did an exhibition around what it was like to be, and we did a project around what it was like to be unemployed, and especially from some of the backgrounds that these men had come from. So we're going to give them a safe space to explore some of the issues that them were facing in society. And the idea that these men come up with was they would like their portrait done, but also a brown paper card with messages on. So the exhibition was looking at key issues around being unemployed for these men. There was some really powerful stories within this. Even the fact that these men wanted to title this exhibition Reusable Resources, because these men seen themselves as past their best, but also them said that they had a lot of skills, but society and employers never valued their skills. What them was saying is we often overlooked, because we've been unemployed for such a period of time and our age, that often what's the point in filling an application form in, because nobody will look at it and it will just be overlooked because of the age. So it was really looking at that as well. But then as a result of that, we were able to have an exhibition of the work of local councillors and local MPs to come along. Had the job centre come along as well. As a result of this, some of the issues that these men were facing there was big issues around literacy. The job centre's on these men's back, asking them to fill application forms in. They had to fill 2-3 application forms in, proving that they were being applying for jobs. Some of these men had real difficulties reading and writing, but the job centre's just seen these men as problematic, actually, and as a result, these men seen the job centre as problematic. So I was able to look and explore that, and also relay this back to the job centre, and there was a lot of work that we developed as a result of that come about that. But also mental health as well, their mental health. Some of the powerful stories that these men would then begin to tell us about was, I can remember one man saying, every day is the same. Every day I get up, the only day I know what day it is during the week is I put my bin out on a Friday. And that's really powerful. That was the only difference in his week. He puts the bin out on a Friday, and now I know it's Friday. But also we were able to explore how society viewed them, and then we're able to talk around that. There was a collective group then that were discussing very similar issues around being unemployed, how their world just got so much smaller by being unemployed, that they used to say it was great for the first week, first month, that you had a little bit of money in your pocket, you were able to go out and socialise with friends. Once that starts to dry up and there's no money left available. The only social activity was that actually I would go to the booties. I would have £1 in my pocket, I'd put a couple of bets on with that £1, but that was my social life. That was the only social life I had. I would maybe get a couple of cans and sit in the house. The social world just becomes so much smaller. Very rarely left their locality as well as a result of the social world just becoming so much smaller. But able to explore that with them and having them explore that. There was a lot of loss involved as well. A lot of these men lost identity, lost obviously income, but also lost relationships with friends, with family members, partners, and also children as well. Once the relationships often break down with partners, there was that loss of family life as well. There was huge loss involved. And you could see why a lot of these men were angry as well. But was able to explore that and using the art, was able to address that in a safe environment. There was no loss of face for these men as well, as opposed to somebody openly talking around that. It was collectively done through using the arts that started to explore these situations with these men as well. And then I also went on and probably the last 4 years worked on a young people's mental health project with Washington in mind. A lot of the work we did was, again, we were looking at 16 to 25-year-olds on the Young People's Project and working with 16 to 25-year-olds. But a lot of the schools were asking us to work with pupil referral units. We worked with the pupil referral unit in Sunderland and the YMCA in Hereford Burn. And it was looking at engaging with these pupils that were having real difficulties, engaging with school life, but also in these pupil referral units still having real trouble engaging with structure in school life as well. But one of the biggest issues when we first went in was why would these pupils refer themselves to us as a mental health service, and why would they refer themselves to us, like I say. A lot of these services were often, when we discussed it with the schools and the kids involved in the schools, was the services that were placed in the schools were often just dropped in. There was no introduction service, there was no sort of build-up period, there was no relationships built. These services were just dropped in, and these kids said, well, a lot of them explained that the services were seen with a real sort of negative experience and real suspicion as to why these services are here. There's a real suspicion around that. So what we used with the pupil referral unit was engagement. We used arts as an engagement tool to engage these young people in our service. So we developed a real project around, with Nicola, around establishing ourselves within the school, as part of the school, but also independent of the school. We established a photography project with these young people in school time, at school term, where the teachers were able to refer their pupils that they maybe had concerns about, but didn't necessarily want to see uni and mental health service, but were able to embed them in our arts intervention. It was great. The kids really explored that. It was also in school time, so it's better than maths or English if you can go out and do a photography project. The kids really took it on board and really developed some powerful stuff and powerful work. But also it was seeing the other kids as well, seeing that the work that they were doing, the other kids wanted to get involved. At first there was suspicion around us coming in, what were we there for, what were we doing. But when the kids seen the other kids and their peers getting involved, then wanted to become involved, there was a lot more acceptance of the service. We developed some really powerful, like I say, powerful media images and portraits, and did some really powerful work with them as well. We had a little exhibition of the work as well. We got parents involved, and for some people it'd been the first time that these parents had come in to see anything positive that they'd done within the school. It was a really positive experience as well. And even the teachers reporting, we have real difficulties getting some of these parents into the school. But also the children were able to take the work back to the parents and report back as well around that. But we also had to remain independent from the school. We didn't want to be seen as part of the school, because often for some of these kids the school is the problem. So it was seen that we were independent, so people did want to engage with us as well. For the young people as well, having that ownership and responsibility was important. It was giving them that ownership. They wanted to become involved, they wanted to be involved in the service. So that was really powerful, that actually they had a duty of care to take ownership and responsibility for that. Teachers would often say that the pupils' behaviour had improved as a result of that. And it was that ownership, it was their responsibility to be involved in that as well. Give a lot of self-worth to a lot of these children and kids as well, that have been involved in something positive as well, but also seeing an end product and seeing that through as well. Some of the work we did in the YMCA was challenging society's views. Often these kids would say that I was sent here, I didn't necessarily want to come here, and how would my peers perceive me that I'm now accessing the YMCA and I've got to be here. We were looking at and challenging what society's views, how them seeing themselves, but also how other people seen them, and let them explore that and take responsibility for that. The YMCA project, we looked at a graffiti project. They wanted to do graffiti, but straight away we were able to question them. What does graffiti say about yourselves? Still wanted to go ahead with it, which was fine, but also they wanted to do graffiti the YMCA. YMCA gave us the sort of youth room. First of all, the kids wanted to do Bob Marley smoking a joint, and it was all that. But it was giving them again responsibility. What other people used the centre. There was younger kids, then therefore didn't want to necessarily put that image over. Them took responsibility and ownership of that, taking that on board as well. But also developing the relationship outside the agencies and accessing that support as well. Some of the kids would access. After a period of time, they would often say, so what do you work as? What do you do? I'm here as Washington Mind. I work as a young people's mental health worker. But also we had counsellors embedded there. We were able then to refer. We had the services there and backing us up. If anything did come about, we'd be able to refer directly to a mental health service for these kids as well. The YMCA work was often the kids didn't necessarily want the YMCA workers to know that they were accessing mental health services, so they would come another route and they would self-refer without the YMCA even knowing. But building them relationships up breaks down them barriers as well. Some of the biggest issues for this was longer term fundings. Longer term funds were needed to continue that work on. It takes time, and often mental health services or public health services really struggle with them time of building them relationships, and that acceptance, especially from younger people, that acceptance of a service needs to be developed before we just expect young people just to access the service. It's about breaking down them barriers and how that service is perceived as well. So a lot of the work, like I say, I've done in public health is public health. Mental health underpins all public health work. All the public health work that we do, mental health underpins it all. Regardless, you can tell people to stop smoking, you can tell people to stop drinking, but mental health underpins all of that work. And it's vital that we start challenging and look at mental health. We need to break down a lot of the barriers with mental health. It's everybody has mental health. Same as physical health, everybody has mental health. But it underpins all public health work. And just one of the things I want to leave you is arts interventions can be an effective medium in which to both engage, address and support mental health initiatives, and a medium in which to challenge health inequalities, therefore should be embedded in public health services from the beginning. Very difficult to get it embedded, but it's about embedding it in funding bids at the beginning with public health as well. Like I say, I work for Prostate Cancer UK, and it's something that we want to look at as well. It's about creating stories as well. It's a powerful medium to create stories and people's personal journeys through public health services and their own stories around public health as well, health services as well.
Thank you very much indeed.